There have been many great characters throughout Street Fighter's 33-year-long lifespan. In total, Street Fighter has had an astonishing 163 characters playable throughout its different games and spin-offs. However, in Street Fighter V, the roster now sits at 40 characters. Which, don't get me wrong, 40 is a lot to pick from, but wouldn't it be great to see some familiar faces from Street Fighter's history return here in Street Fighter V? When I first started to write this script, I was doubtful that Street Fighter V would be getting any new characters at all. But now, with the recent update from Capcom stating that there will be 5 more characters, there's never been a better time for speculation. That's why today I'm counting down my top 10 characters I'd want to see return to the Street Fighter franchise as Street Fighter V DLC. First, some rules. All characters in this list have to have been playable in a Street Fighter game previously, and I will obviously not be including any characters that are already present in Street Fighter V. I will also not be including any characters that were in a way replaced with newer characters, such as Evil Ryu being sort of replaced by Kage in Street Fighter V. If you have any characters you'd love to see back in Street Fighter, be sure to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know what you guys think. With that said, let's get on with the list.
It's go time!
First up on the list, we have Sea Viper from Street Fighter IV. I've always thought that Sea Viper was an interesting character, even if she was really never my favorite to play. That being said, this one is kind of a personal pick, because Sea Viper was the first character I ever played when I picked up Street Fighter IV for my Xbox 360, back when I was younger. Sure, I didn't understand the game back then, and I couldn't input any of her special moves for crap, but she was still the character I would pick, and at the end of the day, that's what lands her in my number 10 spot.
Round 9.
DeCapri has always been a very cool character in my opinion. I really enjoy her little teleport phase thing, and the fact that you can cancel it for mix-ups is pretty awesome. Her fast pace makes her really fun to watch as well as play, and her beam sword arm thingy is just badass. It's worth mentioning that DeCapri is already present in Street Fighter V, just not as a playable character, so seeing her as one of the next DLC fighters would definitely be a treat.
Round 8.
Street Fighter and Final Fight have always been sort of tied together at the hip. With them canonically existing in the same universe and all, many Final Fight characters have crossed over into Street Fighter. However, in my humble opinion, none of them have ever been as interesting as Revend O. For starters, Revend O is a unique take on the whole military fighter character that isn't shown in Street Fighter elsewhere. Guile, Nash, and M. Bison ditch the traditional military weaponry and instead use their fists and their super magic crazy wizard punching techniques. Not Revend O. Revend O uses his staff and some grenades to make for an absolutely unique character who is not only unique in character design, but gameplay as well. His staff also leads to a very interesting moveset that I think would fit very well into Street Fighter V. Also, a V-trigger where Revend O throws grenades that can be cooked and thrown, not unlike Poison's Molotovs, would be a really cool interpretation of his skills transferred to the mechanics of Street Fighter V.
Round 7.
You knew he was going to be on this list somewhere. Dan is a fan-favorite character among Street Fighter players, and many were disappointed to see that he wasn't included in Street Fighter V's base game. Dan is the perfect interpretation of a joke character. Unique takes on the most famous Street Fighter characters' techniques, funny attacks, a super that doesn't actually do anything at all, and a goofy personality. It's hard to see why anybody doesn't love this embodiment of fun. The only reason Dan isn't higher on this list is because I believe it would be hard to justify putting a joke character, one who is designed to be bottom tier, into the DLC lineup, and make people pay for a character that competitively is the opposite of worth their money.
Round 6.
Hakan is an out-of-left-field pick for sure, and I'm sure many of you are curious as to why I think Hakan would be a good addition to the Street Fighter V roster. My answer to you is his mechanics. His game plan is much different from all other characters due to his oil mechanic, and I think that's really interesting. I also believe his oil mechanic works very well with the V system in Street Fighter V, and believe it would lead to some very interesting V skills and triggers that impact his gameplay heavily. But overall, I just think Hakan is fun. He's unique, he's different, he's a breath of fresh air in a game with so many characters sharing just slightly altered movesets. That's why I decided to give Hakan my number 6 spot.
Round 5.
Another character from Final Fight. Sodom is just a funny character. Sodom's essentially a weeb, obsessed with Japanese culture, and uses 2 sai in combat, but for the most part doesn't have any real technique, instead opting for what he thinks looks cool. A lot of the characters in Street Fighter are so deadly serious that it can get a bit boring sometimes, and Sodom brings the lighthearted charm the roster needs. Like everybody on this list, he's fun to play, and an interesting character from a design standpoint. And really, what more do you need than that? Sodom
is fun. If it's not fun, why bother?
Round 4.
I honestly don't have much to say about Oro. I think he's an interesting looking character, and I like the way he plays. I think his whole thing about having one arm is a really neat characteristic, and I believe Oro would work very well with Street Fighter V's V system. But the main reason I want him in is to learn more about him. In Street Fighter V, every character has their own character story mode, where you follow a string of events and battles through one character's point of view, with some comic book styled cutscenes in between. I think this would be perfect for explaining a little bit more about who Oro is, and could help define his character traits into a very lovable character.
Round 3.
Rose is just plain awesome. It's as simple as that. She moves like a beautiful ribbon dancer while dishing out devastating damage, and I think she would be an awesome addition to Street Fighter V's cast. Her design is amazing, so much so that I think I may have seen it elsewhere. And overall, she's just a well-made character.
Round 2.
Now we're getting into the big boys. Dudley is one of the coolest Street Fighter characters ever created. His posh, mannered attitude, comboed with his oppressive fighting prowess, leads to one of the most beloved characters in Street Fighter history. And let's not forget about his third strike theme. Hey, Jackie, can we get that on?
Okay. I'm jamming.
Anyways, Dudley has always been one of my favorite characters in all of Street Fighter, and I think it's a crime that he's not in the game already. So now that Capcom's giving it another chance, I'm giving Dudley another chance. However, there is one more character that I want more than Dudley.
Casual match.
Before we get on to who that is, however, let's look at my honorable mention, Q. Q is an amazingly interesting character, mainly because of how little we know about him. He's a faceless warrior with no skin exposed and the mask of a robot. His movements are drained, slow, and zombie-like. What exactly happened to Q? We don't know. He's a very fun character to play on top of that, and overall is an amazing choice for a new character. All of this may sound like I love Q, so why isn't he on the list? Well, because he's already in the game. I know some of you may be confused, but let me explain, hold on. During Season 3 of Street Fighter V, a brand new character by the name of G was introduced. G is a patriotic president, supposedly president of the world, and has some insane powers. He moves like the wind and can swiftly defeat most of the cast with ease. However, look closer and you'll see that he bears a striking resemblance to his other one-letter named brother. Comparing their moves, they all have the same or very similar attacks, just G's are alive and Q's are dead. This is even further reinforced by the fact that G has an alternate costume that bears more than striking resemblance to Q himself. The final piece of the puzzle lies in the timeline. Canonically, Street Fighter III Third Strike happens 6th on the timeline, right after Street Fighter V. One can assume that during this time, something happened to G, which hurt him horribly and transformed him into the monster that is Q.
Round 1.
Here he is. My boy. My favorite character in all of Street Fighter history, and my main in both Street Fighter 3 and 4. Hugo. I really can't see why anybody doesn't love this character. He is so full of personality and nails the friendly but kinda dumb giant trope we see so much in pop culture. His sprites in Third Strike are so expressive and so well done that when I first saw him I was in love. Not to mention, he is the most fun heavyweight I've ever played. He has so much weight to him, while still having the ability to dish out quick attacks and pressure your opponent into complete destruction. On top of that, adding Hugo to the cast would make Street Fighter V the first Street Fighter game ever to feature 2 different super heavyweight options, instead of Hugo or Abigail. Hugo could also have some very cool V moves as well. For example, what about a V skill that makes Hugo trip and fall over, breaking guard and having super armor? That would make for the really oppressive gameplay I love Hugo so much for. Plus, we'd get more insight into his relationship with Poison, which I think is a very interesting dynamic. My final reason is that I love to see a weak character become strong. Hugo has sadly always been near the bottom of the tier list in the games he's featured in. I'd be so happy to see Capcom rebalance Hugo for this game and put him up on the tier list with his counterpart Abigail. Overall, I love Hugo more than any other Street Fighter character, and seeing him make it into this game would make me squeal with glee. Those were the top 10 characters I'd love to see as DLC for Street Fighter V. If you have any characters I left off this list, or want to discuss the list with me, make sure to comment down below. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope to see you next time.